In the bustling city of Metropolis, where skyscrapers reached for the heavens and luxury cars cruised down polished streets, lived a billionaire named Richard Blake. Richard was the epitome of success, having built his fortune from scratch in the tech industry. With a net worth in the hundreds of millions, he was accustomed to getting what he wanted, when he wanted it. He lived in a lavish penthouse overlooking the city skyline, adorned with every luxury imaginable. His life was marked by extravagant parties, high-end fashion, and a social circle filled with other wealthy elites. Despite his affluence, Richard was known for his cold demeanor and lack of empathy towards those less fortunate. To him, the world was a meritocracy. If someone failed, it was their own fault. He often dismissed the homeless as lazy or unworthy, a perspective that only deepened his isolation from the real struggles of everyday life. On the opposite end of the socio-economic spectrum was a man named Thomas, a homeless individual who had seen better days. Once a promising artist, Thomas had fallen into despair after a series of personal tragedies that led him to the streets. His days were spent searching for food and shelter, and his nights were filled with the haunting sounds of the city. Thomas wore the worn-out clothes he had scavenged, and his unkempt beard and disheveled hair told the story of a man who had long lost hope. Yet, despite his circumstances, Thomas retained a glimmer of kindness in his heart. He would often share his meager food with other homeless people, demonstrating a compassion that stood in stark contrast to Richard's cold perspective. Their paths would cross one fateful afternoon. Richard, on his way to a business meeting, strolled through a park that had become a temporary haven for the city's homeless. He spotted Thomas sitting on a bench, clutching a tattered sketchbook. The sight of the man lost in his art struck Richard as peculiar. Instead of feeling compassion, he felt a sense of superiority. "Get a job, you lazy bum," Richard scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. Thomas looked up, momentarily surprised by the harsh words, but he simply returned to his drawing, trying to ignore the wealthy man's contempt. At that moment, Richard felt a rush of satisfaction. He had reinforced his belief that those who lived on the streets were responsible for their own misfortune. He didn't bother to consider the complexity of Thomas's life or the dreams he had once held. Instead, he walked away, chuckling to himself about the absurdity of someone like Thomas believing he could be an artist. Little did Richard know that this encounter would soon come back to haunt him in ways he could never have imagined. The juxtaposition of their lives painted a vivid picture of society's divide. Richard, with his wealth and power, stood blind to the struggles of those around him, while Thomas, despite his dire circumstances, held on to his humanity. The stage was set for a confrontation between these two worlds, one that would force Richard to confront his prejudices and ultimately redefine what it meant to be a hero. On a brisk afternoon in Metropolis, the atmosphere was filled with the clamor of honking vehicles, snippets of lively chatter, and the laughter of children enjoying the park. Richard Blake, clad in his impeccably tailored suit, walked with an air of confidence, his mind consumed by thoughts of financial gains and upcoming business deals. He was en route to a crucial meeting that could potentially propel his company to new heights. As he made his way, he was largely oblivious to his surroundings, focusing solely on reaching his destination. Approaching a small clearing, Richard's attention was inadvertently drawn to a figure seated on a nearby bench. It was Thomas, the homeless man he had previously encountered, engrossed in sketching within his tattered sketchbook. The sight was somewhat absurd to Richard, a man like Thomas, with his disheveled appearance, seemingly lost in a world of creativity. Richard couldn't help but mock the ridiculousness of the situation. What future could someone like that possibly envision? With a smug expression, Richard approached the bench, eager to deliver a pointed remark. "Hey! You do realize nobody is going to buy your art, right? You might as well quit," he called out, his tone filled with disdain. Thomas looked up, momentarily startled, his eyes meeting Richard's with a mix of hurt and defiance. "Art isn't solely about making money, it's about expressing oneself," he replied softly, attempting to brush off the negativity. Richard chuckled derisively, the sound reverberating in the park. "Expression? You think anyone cares about the doodles of a homeless man? Get real. You should be focused on surviving, not drawing pictures, he shot back, feeling a rush of superiority. The words cut deeper than Thomas would admit. He had invested so much of himself into his art, using it as a refuge from the brutal realities of his life on the streets. Yet, he had grown accustomed to the scornful remarks from those who lived in privilege. "You don't understand anything about survival," he stated, his voice calm but tinged with emotion. Richard dismissed him with a wave, reveling in the sense of triumph he felt from belittling someone he perceived as inferior. "Why should I care? You made your choices. The world owes you nothing," he replied, turning away with a sense of victory. As he walked off, he couldn't shake the feeling of having asserted his dominance over a lesser individual. Unbeknownst to Richard, this brief encounter would linger in his mind, echoing in the corners of his thoughts. The exchange, marked by his arrogance and disdain, would soon resonate far more than he could foresee. Days went by, and Richard continued his life, blissfully unaware of how fate was intricately weaving their narratives together. Meanwhile, Thomas persisted in his art, pouring his emotions onto the page, finding comfort in the beauty he created despite the harshness surrounding him. Little did they know that their paths would soon intersect in a way that would challenge Richard's convictions and force him to confront the prejudices he clung to so tightly. The universe was preparing to deliver a lesson that neither man could ignore. Thomas's life was a stark contrast to the polished world of Richard Blake. As a homeless man navigating the unforgiving streets of Metropolis, Thomas faced daily struggles that most people couldn't even begin to comprehend. His mornings often began with the harsh light of dawn breaking through the city's skyline, illuminating the grim reality of his surroundings. He would awaken on a park bench or in a makeshift shelter, surrounded by discarded items and the remnants of last night's chaos. Once a talented artist with dreams of showcasing his work in galleries, Thomas's life had taken a downward spiral due to a series of personal tragedies. The loss of his family and the collapse of his career had left him shattered, and he found himself battling not only poverty but also the haunting memories of his past. Despite this, he carried a tattered sketchbook with him wherever he went, using it as an outlet for his emotions and a means of escape. Each page was filled with intricate drawings that revealed the beauty he still saw in the world, even as he faced its darkest corners. His days were a relentless quest for survival. Thomas would often roam the streets, searching for food scraps or a kind soul willing to spare a meal. He had learned to navigate the city's social dynamics, understanding which neighborhoods were safer and which places offered the possibility of a warm meal. While many passed him by without a second glance, he developed a keen awareness of the people around him. He recognized the faces of fellow homeless individuals, each with their own unique stories and struggles. Yet, in the midst of his hardships, Thomas retained an unwavering sense of kindness. He would share whatever little food he managed to acquire with others in need, refusing to let his circumstances harden his heart. He often offered words of encouragement to those around him, reminding them that their worth wasn't defined by their situation. Thomas's innate compassion set him apart, illuminating the humanity that still resided within him. His nights were often spent under the stars, with the distant sounds of the city lulling him to sleep. While many would see the darkness of the streets as a source of fear, Thomas found solace in the quiet moments of reflection. He would sketch the night sky, capturing the beauty of the stars that twinkled above him as a reminder that hope could still exist, even in the bleakest of circumstances. Despite the challenges he faced, Thomas held on to the flicker of his artistic dreams. He believed that art had the power to transcend barriers, to connect people from different walks of life. And so, he continued to draw, pouring his heart and soul into each piece, dreaming of a day when he could share his work with the world. This unwavering spirit of resilience and hope, hidden beneath the layers of hardship, would soon play a pivotal role in the journey that awaited him and Richard Blake. In the lavish penthouse of Richard Blake, the atmosphere was one of affluence and privilege. The walls were adorned with original artworks, each piece meticulously chosen to reflect Richard's status and taste. Yet, amidst the opulence, there was a warmth that emanated from his daughter, Emily. At just 15, Emily was a bright and spirited girl, embodying the very essence of youth and hope. Unlike her father, who often viewed the world through a lens of superiority, Emily possessed a natural empathy that drew her to the struggles of others. Emily had grown up in a world of excess, attending exclusive private schools and mingling with the children of other wealthy families. However, she was never one to flaunt her wealth or look down on those less fortunate. From a young age, her mother had instilled in her the importance of kindness and compassion, often taking Emily to volunteer at local shelters and community centers. These experiences had shaped her understanding of the world and ignited a passion for social justice. One afternoon, while exploring the city with her friends, Emily stumbled upon a local art exhibit showcasing the works of emerging artists. Intrigued, she wandered through the gallery, captivated by the diverse expressions of creativity on display. It was there that she first encountered Thomas's art, a series of hauntingly beautiful sketches that depicted the struggles and triumphs of life on the streets. Each piece resonated deeply with her, evoking a sense of urgency to connect with the artist behind the work. Emily became determined to learn more about Thomas and his story. She felt an inexplicable connection to his art, recognizing the raw emotion and vulnerability captured in each stroke. Her heart ached for the artist, who, despite his hardships, poured his soul into his creations. It was a perspective her father had never bothered to understand, and she longed to bridge the gap between their vastly different worlds. With each passing day, Emily found herself increasingly drawn to the city's hidden corners, seeking out the stories of those who lived there. She began to engage with the homeless community, listening to their experiences and learning about their lives. In doing so, she discovered a sense of purpose that transcended the lavish lifestyle she had always known. She realized that her privilege came with a responsibility to advocate for those who were often overlooked. As Emily navigated her own journey of self-discovery, she often pondered the disconnect between her father's world and the realities faced by people like Thomas. She sensed that Richard's wealth had blinded him to the struggles of others, and she felt a growing desire to show him that compassion and empathy were just as important as success and status. Little did Emily know that her path would soon intertwine with Thomas's in a way that would challenge her father's perceptions and lead to unforeseen circumstances. As she continued to explore her passion for art and social justice, the stage was being set for a dramatic encounter that would alter the course of their lives forever. It was a seemingly ordinary afternoon when everything changed. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets of Metropolis. Richard was busy with back-to-back meetings, engrossed in the demands of his corporate empire, while Emily was at home, preparing for an art class she was excited about. She had been inspired to create a new piece that reflected her growing awareness of the struggles faced by those in her city. As Emily left the apartment, she decided to take a detour through the park, hoping to find more inspiration for her artwork. With her sketchbook clutched in one hand, she wandered through the paths, her eyes scanning the scenery for ideas. The park was alive with people, children playing, couples walking hand in hand, and the occasional street performer showcasing their talents. Yet, amidst the vibrancy, Emily felt a sense of unease as she recalled the stories she had heard from the homeless community. Meanwhile, Richard's day took an unexpected turn. While driving home from a meeting, he received a frantic call from Emily's art teacher, who informed him that his daughter had been seen wandering alone in the area known for its homeless population. Panic gripped Richard as he envisioned all the dangers that could befall her. He quickly instructed his driver to take him to the park, his heart racing with worry. As Emily continued her stroll, she noticed a commotion near the entrance of the park. A crowd had gathered, and she felt an instinctive pull to see what was happening. As she drew closer, she saw a car engulfed in flames, smoke billowing into the sky. The shrill sound of sirens echoed in the distance, but the scene before her was chaotic and overwhelming. In a split second, her attention shifted to a figure trapped inside the burning vehicle, struggling to escape. The sight sent a jolt of fear through Emily, and without thinking, she rushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see that the driver was unconscious, and the flames were licking hungrily at the edges of the car. At that moment, everything seemed to slow down. Emily's instincts kicked in, fueled by a determination to help. She shouted for someone to call 911, but the crowd was frozen in shock, unsure of what to do. As the flames grew more intense, she realized that time was running out. Just then, from the periphery of the crowd, Thomas, the homeless artist, emerged. He had been nearby, sketching the scene in his notebook, when the chaos unfolded. Despite his own struggles, something deep within him stirred. He couldn't stand by and watch someone perish in the fire. Without hesitation, he sprang into action, rushing toward the vehicle with a courage he didn't know he possessed. Emily and Thomas locked eyes for a brief moment, a silent understanding passing between them. They both knew they had to act quickly. Together, they approached the car, determined to save the trapped driver. As the heat intensified, Thomas pulled open the door, fighting against the flames that threatened to engulf them. The crowd gasped as they witnessed the bravery of two unlikely heroes, one from wealth and privilege, and the other from the shadows of the streets. In that pivotal moment, the lines between their worlds blurred, and the true essence of humanity shone through. With smoke billowing from the burning car and the flames dancing dangerously close, the urgency of the situation heightened. Emily's heart raced as she and Thomas reached the vehicle, both acutely aware of the peril they faced. The trapped driver, still unconscious, was at the mercy of the raging fire, and every second counted. "Hold on!" Thomas shouted to Emily, his voice firm despite the chaos surrounding them. He had no time to lose. Instinctively, he grabbed the door handle, his hands trembling from a mix of fear and adrenaline. With a swift tug, he pulled the door open, but the heat radiating from within was suffocating. Emily peered inside, her eyes widening as she assessed the situation. "We need to get him out," she cried, glancing at Thomas, who nodded in agreement. Together, they reached into the car, trying to maneuver the driver's body out of the burning wreckage. The flames were licking at their clothes, and the acrid smoke stung their eyes, but neither of them hesitated. As they pulled with all their strength, the driver groaned, beginning to regain consciousness. What's happening?" he mumbled, his voice weak. "I can't move." "Just hold on. We're getting you out," Emily urged, her determination unwavering. With one final heave, they managed to drag the driver free, tumbling him onto the pavement just as the flames erupted further, engulfing the car in a furious blaze. The crowd that had been paralyzed by shock erupted into cheers and gasps of relief, witnessing the bravery of these two individuals who came together against all odds. Thomas and Emily, both panting and covered in soot, stepped back from the vehicle, their hearts pounding in unison. As the sirens grew louder, the fire department arrived, quickly taking control of the situation. Firefighters rushed past Emily and Thomas, assessing the driver's condition and extinguishing the flames. It was a scene of chaos, but amidst it all, the two heroes stood together, their eyes reflecting a newfound bond forged in the heat of the moment. In the aftermath, as the adrenaline began to fade, Emily turned to Thomas, her expression a mix of gratitude and awe. "I can't believe we did that," she said breathlessly, still trying to process the gravity of what had just occurred. Thomas, his heart still racing, looked at her with a humble smile. "We both did what we had to do." "You were amazing out there," he replied, acknowledging her courage. Little did they know that this shared experience would become a pivotal turning point in both of their lives. For Emily, it was a revelation that would deepen her understanding of empathy and the power of action. For Thomas, this moment reaffirmed his belief in the goodness of humanity, igniting a spark of hope that had long been dimmed by the struggles of his reality. As the crowd began to disperse and the emergency responders took charge, Richard arrived on the scene, his heart sinking as he rushed toward the chaos. He spotted Emily amid the crowd, relief flooding over him as he realized she was safe, but confusion quickly followed as he took in the sight of the burning car and the gathering crowd. "Emily," he shouted, his voice laced with concern. He hurried to her side, wrapping his arms around her. "What happened? Are you okay?" Emily looked at her father, her eyes shining with a mix of adrenaline and emotion. "I'm fine, Dad." "But we saved him," she exclaimed, gesturing toward the driver, who was now being attended to by paramedics. Richard's gaze shifted from his daughter to Thomas, who stood nearby, still catching his breath. A feeling of bewilderment washed over him as he struggled to comprehend the scene unfolding before him. Here was a man he had dismissed only days before, now standing as a hero. Richard felt an unfamiliar stirring within him, a challenge to his long-held beliefs about people like Thomas. In that moment, the lines between their worlds began to blur, setting the stage for a journey of transformation that none of them could have anticipated. In the days following the dramatic incident in the park, the city buzzed with news of the heroic rescue. Emily and Thomas were hailed as local heroes, their bravery capturing the attention of media outlets and community members alike. The story of the young girl and the homeless artist who had risked their lives to save a stranger resonated deeply, shining a light on the often overlooked struggles faced by those living on the fringes of society. Richard, still grappling with the reality of his daughter's actions, found himself reflecting on the events that had unfolded. Initially, he had felt nothing but fear and anger when he received the call about Emily potentially being in danger. Now, however, he was confronted with the reality that his perceptions had been shaken to their core. The very man he had dismissed as inconsequential was now being celebrated for his courage. As the media frenzy continued, Richard decided to reach out to Thomas. He recognized that he needed to understand the man behind the headlines, to look beyond the surface and learn about Thomas's life and experiences. He arranged for a meeting at a local cafe, a neutral ground where they could converse away from the chaos of the park. When the day arrived, Richard felt a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. He had spent most of his life in a world of privilege, often surrounded by people who shared his socio-economic status. Meeting Thomas would challenge his preconceived notions and force him to confront the biases he had harbored for so long. Thomas arrived at the cafe, looking a bit out of place in the polished environment filled with well-dressed patrons. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, remnants of his previous life before the streets. Richard was already seated at a table, and as their eyes met, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. "Thank you for meeting with me, Thomas," Richard began, trying to adopt a cordial tone. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened in the park." Thomas nodded, his expression neutral but curious. "It was a crazy day, that's for sure," he replied, his voice steady. "I just did what I felt was right." Richard leaned forward, compelled to dig deeper. "Can you tell me more about your life? I want to understand what you've been through." Thomas took a breath, feeling the weight of Richard's question. He opened up about his past, sharing stories of his family, his passion for art, and the unfortunate turn of events that had led him to homelessness. As he spoke, Richard listened intently, slowly beginning to see the man before him not as a stereotype but as a complex individual with dreams, fears, and a rich history. During their conversation, Richard found himself grappling with his own biases. He realized that he had often viewed the homeless as mere statistics or failures rather than as human beings with stories worth telling. Thomas's resilience and passion for art resonated with him, igniting a spark of empathy he had long suppressed. As their discussion continued, Richard proposed an idea that surprised even himself. "What if we collaborated? I could help you showcase your art in a gallery. You have a powerful story, and I believe people need to see it." Thomas hesitated, unsure of how to react. The offer was unexpected and seemed too generous, but he could sense Richard's sincerity. "You really think people would want to see my work? I've been on the streets for so long," he trailed off, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Absolutely," Richard affirmed, his conviction growing. "Your art has the ability to connect people, to challenge their perceptions. Let's show them the truth of your experiences." In that moment, Thomas felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. The possibility of sharing his story, of breaking down the walls that separated him from the world he had once belonged to, began to take root. As the two men embarked on this unexpected journey together, their collaboration would not only change Thomas's life but also profoundly impact Richard's understanding of compassion, privilege, and the power of human connection. The path ahead would be filled with challenges, but they were ready to face them together, united by a shared mission to bridge the gap between their worlds. Weeks turned into months as Richard and Thomas worked tirelessly to prepare for the upcoming art exhibition. The event was set to take place in one of Metropolis's prestigious galleries, a venue known for showcasing both established and emerging artists. Richard utilized his connections and resources to secure the space, while Thomas poured his heart into creating new pieces that reflected his journey and the stories of those he had met on the streets. As the exhibition date approached, excitement and anxiety filled the air. Thomas had never imagined his artwork would be displayed in such a prominent location, and the thought of sharing his story with a wider audience both thrilled and terrified him. Richard, on the other hand, was determined to ensure that the event was a success and that Thomas received the recognition he deserved. In the weeks leading up to the exhibition, they held planning meetings, discussing everything from the layout of the gallery to the promotional materials that would help draw attention to the event. Richard emphasized the importance of telling Thomas's story alongside the artwork, wanting attendees to understand the man behind the pieces. They crafted a narrative that highlighted Thomas's resilience and the beauty of art as a form of survival. Finally, the day of the exhibition arrived. The gallery was adorned with Thomas's artwork, each piece telling a story of struggle, hope, and humanity. As the doors opened, guests began to filter in, their eyes widening in awe at the raw emotion captured in the sketches and paintings. The atmosphere was electric, filled with conversations and laughter, but also a palpable sense of purpose. Emily, who had been instrumental in promoting the event through social media and word of mouth, mingled with the guests, watching as people engaged with Thomas's art. She felt a wave of pride wash over her, knowing that her father's efforts were helping to amplify a voice that had long been silenced. Richard stood by Thomas's side, observing the reactions of the attendees. He felt a mixture of nerves and excitement as people approached to discuss the artwork. "Your pieces are incredible," one guest remarked, pointing at a poignant sketch that depicted a homeless man sharing a moment of kindness with a child. "What inspired you?" Thomas smiled, finding comfort in the connection. "Life inspires me. Every experience, every person I meet has a story worth telling. I just try to capture those moments," he replied, his voice steady. As the night progressed, Richard took the opportunity to introduce Thomas to various influential figures in the art community, showcasing his talent and passion. He could see that Thomas was beginning to feel a sense of belonging, a feeling that had eluded him for so long. However, amidst the celebration, Richard was also confronted with the reality of his privilege. He noticed some guests who viewed Thomas with skepticism, their preconceived notions about homelessness surfacing as they examined his work. It was a stark reminder that while some were moved by the art, others still held on to their biases. Determined to address this, Richard decided to give a speech at the exhibition's midpoint. He stood before the audience, his heart racing, but his resolve firm. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to take a moment to reflect on the power of art and the stories it tells. Thomas's work is not just about beautiful images, it's about the resilience of the human spirit. It's important for us to recognize the stories behind the faces we often overlook." His words resonated with many, prompting a shift in the atmosphere. Conversations turned deeper, and guests began to engage with Thomas not just as an artist, but as a person with invaluable experiences and insights. The exhibition became a space for dialogue, challenging attendees to confront their biases and rethink their understanding of homelessness. As the night drew to a close, Richard felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The exhibition had not only showcased Thomas's incredible talent but had also sparked important conversations about compassion and community. Thomas, standing amidst a crowd of admirers, realized that he was no longer just a struggling artist, he was a voice for change, and for the first time in years, he felt seen and appreciated. The success of the exhibition marked the beginning of a new chapter for both Thomas and Richard. Together, they had created a platform for awareness and connection, proving that art could transcend boundaries and foster empathy. As they celebrated the evening's achievements, they knew that their journey was far from over. It was just the beginning of a shared mission to uplift others and continue breaking down the barriers that divided their worlds.